Good afternoon and welcome to Discernment Radio. I'm your host, Danielle Pailly.
I'm your host, Cindy Riednauer. We are Discernment Radio, people and topics to enhance your life.
Gail Condrick is the founder of an award-winning cable television station in the Washington, D.C. area and is a member of the International NIA Technique Training Faculty, one of 30 people in the world certified to train instructors, and is a sacred contracts and archetypal consultant. She's a freelance writer and holds writing retreats at Sarasota's beautiful Selby Gardens. An accomplished speaker, Gail regularly speaks at creativity conferences and events. Gail Condrick is also a certified Labyrinth facilitator and has led Labyrinth walks at an innovative cancer center. She also holds women's retreats twice a year and offers classes and workshops in all these subject areas. Today's topic is Archetypes of Creativity, how they work in your destiny and life. Gail Condrick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How does one go from being in the public television industry to soul exploring in spiritual quests and teaching subjects like you do?
Well, I guess the cute answer is step by step, and I think that's the way it unfolded for me, and certainly people who are on a path of going deeper find their way. For me, that path started when I was in television, and I was looking for a release from the ups and downs and the stresses, and I found something called the NIA technique, which opened my mind to many new mind, body, spirit practices, and from there it was one thing after another, and here I am.
So can you describe a little bit about all the different things that you are doing right now?
Well, I have several things that I'm doing. I retired in 2007 from being the director of cable programming for Fairfax County, Virginia. And when I did that, I knew that it was going to be a bit of a challenge to find something to measure up to the pleasure that I had in that job. What it came to be was to do the art of the NIA technique, the dance movement, but also I had become quite involved with the work of Carolyn Mace, and she is the author of Sacred Contracts, and that has captured my mind and my spirit. As well as other things that are related to going deeper. Labyrinth movement is part of that. And writing is part of that. So there are several things I do, but they all have an overarching theme, and that is that I like to introduce and work with creative projects.
So you have so many different things in your wheelhouse. Is there one of those that you like more than the others?
Well, that's a difficult question, liking more than the others. But I will tell you that the one thing that is really important to me is to be able to provide people with some of the knowledge that I have acquired. And so teaching is quite important to me. And so that is how I introduce this myriad of subjects.
So I want to back up just a second for people who might not be familiar with NIA first. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, NIA is a mind-body fitness program. It was formed in 1983 and is one of the longest-running fitness programs in the country, where we made history by taking off our shoes. And at one time, NIA was considered non-impact aerobics, NIA, and over the years, people were finding that they were getting a lot more than fitness out of their hour. And it was enabling them to open up to tone their bodies, but also to open up their emotions and their spirit and to receive healing on many levels and a strong sense of community. So the NIA technique has grown and developed and is 35 years old this year and will continue for a long time.
I think that's pretty fascinating because people probably don't realize they're so rigid in their day-to-day routine that when you let loose and start moving, all the emotions that come up and all the it's very liberating. So I could see that turning into a more spiritual experience.
So, Gail, I've had the pleasure of taking some of your classes, and so what I remember from those is that you do have some structured routines, and you also have a lot of time where you do free dance. So can you explain a little bit about the difference between those two techniques?
Yes, the NIA classes usually include both form and freedom. And the freedom is what you're referring to as free dance. That can be anything from moving the way your spirit wants to move to the particular music that's playing, or how your body wants to respond to the beat or the rhythm and the emotion that you personally put into it. The form is that NIA is actually based on 52 different movements. As a student, you don't need to master each one of those with perfection. However, if you were to walk into a yoga studio and you see a chart on the wall that has all the asana poses, you would see the same thing for NIA with 52 different moves, even though we don't have a chart.
I demand that you have a chart. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your work as a creativity consultant. How do you see that integrating with society as we see it today?
I really think that there's nothing more important than each of us achieving our highest potential. And for many people, that involves expressing their creativity. For the issues that we're facing in our personal lives, in our country today, and in the future, a creative approach is going to be necessary for all of the challenges that we have. So finding a way to be more creative, or being encouraged to express your creativity and your own innate wisdom and your special personal skill, I think is going to be quite important.
So were you always creative, Gail? Did you always see yourself that way?
Well, I certainly didn't always see myself that way, but yes is a short answer. I think I've got that creative gene, and I was always doing something, although not necessarily what might have been labeled in my time of growing up as creative.
Now, I'm curious, for the left brain logical thinker, do you have clients who reach out to you and they're like, I'm not creative, and you help them explore that and find where they are creative?
Well, actually, yes, I do. And when you think about that, think about people who might consider themselves left brain. Let's say a scientist. So the experiments and discovery are all about creativity. And so much of the history of the creative advances around the world have come from odd things, like dreams, or this isn't going to work, and walk away from the experiment and find a solution. That's creativity in action right there. And so I think that everyone is creative, and it is a matter of degree. So perhaps your creativity is on a scale of, you would say, well, I'm creative during the holiday season. I decorate the house, or I love to make cakes once a year. Okay. And then there's someone else who wakes up in the morning and is just flooded with ideas and actions that they want to take.
I have one more thing I wanted to add. I was actually watching a documentary. You mentioned scientists on Einstein, where he had the mind experiments. And the fact that you can go through an experiment and visualize people in your mind, I don't know that I have that creative skill, but I find it fascinating that he was able to use those mental experiments, which would kind of go and be in alignment with the creativity you're talking about.
So does the NIA technique enter into the creativity streak too? How do you see a relationship in those?
Well, it certainly does, in that the creative expression of the technique with the 52 moves is up to the individual instructor. And so it's coming through that person on how they develop the work, how they show the work, what's going on in their practice, and what they show to others. And also people who are in the class, and it's not all about the instructors for sure, but the people who are in the class usually are resonating not only with the instructor, but how it makes them feel and the community spirit that they receive from coming to classes.
Well, I know that when I did the classes, I sure felt that, and it was a wonderful feeling. So let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about the archetypal coaching that you do. So can you explain what an archetype is and how coaching someone could help them understand themselves better?
Yes, well, archetypes are things that you know and you'll recognize, although the word archetype might be a new one. It certainly was new for me when I first heard it. And that is that, let's say you're describing someone and you say, she's such an athlete. And that brings something to my mind.
She scared me for a second. She's such a... Sorry, continue.
Or maybe I say she's such a networker, or she acts like a queen, or he thinks he's such a prince, or he's my knight in shining armor. So all of these are archetypes in that the word is symbolizing an energy pattern, a personality pattern, and in my view, a soul calling that is one that helps someone understand their life purpose, some of the things that have happened to them in their lives, and also what they really, really need and want to do for their own spiritual development, or simply becoming more fully human and rising to their full potential.
So you mentioned Carolyn May's archetypes. How do they differ, or are they similar to, say, Joseph Campbell's archetypes or Carl Jung archetypes?
Well, archetypes are universal, so there's going to be a lot of crossover, whether they're called exactly the same thing or not. As a certified archetypal consultant from Carolyn May's, I work with about 75 different archetypes, which she describes in her book. Some of them are composites of things that you're mentioning, like the Jung archetype or the Joseph Campbell archetype. But since we're talking about energy patterns and human beings, there's a lot of crossover regardless of exactly what the name is. And archetypes have been around since Plato. So this is something that we've always had in our consciousness and our awareness as a way to understand a certain something about the way that we react to people. The archetypes themselves for each of us from Carolyn's theory is that we all have a certain number of archetypes, and that number is 12. That are the ones that are most closest to us. There's a whole pantheon of things that we do occasionally, and they also influence us. But there's 12 of them that live in us and that we are part of. And discovering what those are is part of the job of discovering a sacred contract, or in working with someone like me to come up with, who am I? Where am I going?
And do they express themselves at different times? So if they're working with 12, maybe the prince or the networker or something is more present at a given time than another?
Exactly.
Okay. So, of course, we have to ask, can you give us an example of someone we all might be familiar with and the archetype as you see them, either real or fictional?
Okay, let's see. Let's pick one. Well, very often a way to decode archetypes and begin looking for them is through film or television, in that actors are portraying a certain role, and very often that role by the developer of the program or the film is such that they want you to get a sense of what would a detective do, for example. So let's take one. One of my favorites in recent years is Wonder Woman.
She's everybody's favorite.
I'm loving Wonder Woman, right? I saw the movie 11 times and counting. Yes, wow. I know. But my excuse is I was seeing it for archetypal patterns, but that's not completely true. But the character of Wonder Woman and the issue of why is it rising again is the one that's important to me. What is it that women are resonating with on the Wonder Woman archetype? She, like all of us, has a group of archetypal patterns. She's described as a princess in that her mother is the queen of the warrior women, and she is Princess Diana on the magical island. She's clearly an Amazon and a warrior, so she has that archetype. And like all of the hero's journeys or heroine's journeys, as you were mentioning, Danielle, of Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, she has to leave her tribe in order to find her full fulfillment. So one of the important things about archetypes is that even though we all have these 12, it's how they work together that's important. So if, for example, in Wonder Woman, she has a princess archetype and she has a warrior archetype. So someone else might have a princess archetype and an artist archetype. And can you see how that would be very different? So it's how they work in combination that's important to check on. So for her, she leaves her tribe. She goes to fight and to defend, and she does it from a feminine point of view. In that she, even though she's told repeatedly when it came during World War I that she was going to venture out into no man's land. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? No man's land. She's going to venture out there to move the battle ahead. And that she's showing compassion. So she's showing for the people along the way, she's showing a different side of the warrior. It doesn't have to be a feminine side only, but she is showing a different side of warrior.
Very interesting. So when you work with the archetypes on people, is there any certain pattern or any certain archetype that you see and say, oh, this is tougher to deal with than some of the others?
The archetype isn't difficult, but it's not easy to say to someone, well, you have a vampire. I'm not kidding. That sounds like a vampire. So if it is, what are we going to do to turn that around?
And that was actually what I was going to ask. Like, now that you have that information, so if somebody's a psychic vampire, you're sucking people's energy or something, how do you advise them to make certain changes?
Well, you just described it perfectly. Sucking people dry. It's in all the archetypes have a shadow and a light. And so the idea is that none of them are good or bad, they just are. And not one is better than the other. What you want to begin to notice is, when is the archetype taking over my life? And is that okay? Do I want to stop it?
That's a really good point.
So if you had to tell somebody that they were a vampire, how would you even tell them that?
I would ask them if they had listened to themselves lately, and do they complain a lot? Is it always someone else's fault?
Very tactful.
Do they get energized after they spill their feelings on their friends?
Oh, interesting.
In that case, they're looking for someone to absorb their issues.
Before we move on, what would a warrior do? Because that sounds much more empowering.
Yes. Let's go back to that. What would a warrior do in general?
Or how would you guide them to embrace their positive, light warrior side?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the warrior, as all archetypes, also has a shadow. And the shadow would be going to battle over everything. So the empowered warrior is actually the peaceful warrior. The Dan Millman version of peaceful warrior. I think in that the warrior is strong enough in itself to understand and be ready to stand up for the cause that they believe in, and at the right time. A warrior is more strategic. And so the strategy would be, are all battles worth fighting? Is this a battle to fight, or is this one I let develop? And frankly, warriors need R&R. Yeah. So it's like our soldiers who have an R&R tour as part of their tour of duty, to refresh, to re-energize, and to get ready to go back full steam ahead.
You know, it's fascinating. You're talking about warriors, and I'm seeing Facebook posts popping up in my head and I'm sure everyone's experienced this. There's at least one friend who every day is protesting about something. Yes. So it's really interesting when you talk about the shadow and the light of how you pick your battles, how you choose to be assertive versus aggressive, because I can see the warrior going off the charts even on social media.
So, Gail, I know that you've done workshops, too, on looking at people's clothing and relating them to what archetypes those pieces of clothing represent. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think what's funny about that is how it came about. I realized that for myself that women often commented on what I was wearing. And for a while I would think, what I'm wearing isn't really very important, and can we just talk about something else? And then I realized, okay, that's just the way it is. And so I developed the archetypes in clothing as a way to help myself and others see the creative expression they choose to wear in their clothes and what it represents to others. And so for me, it's a way of me to invite people to either just talk about clothes or to go deeper.
And by the way, you look fabulous today.
Thank you.
Should we describe her outfit and see if she can self-diagnose her archetype?
Well, this is the this is the creative, colorful artist at work.
Awesome. It's beautiful. So let's change gears here and let's talk about your labyrinth work. Can you describe what you are doing with Walking a Labyrinth and how you teach it and help people?
The Labyrinth movement is an extraordinary movement that really started in the United States in the 1980s with Dr. Lauren Artris of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And the labyrinths have been around for thousands of years. What Dr. Artris did was to form an organization called Veriditas, which I'm honored to be part of, and I've taken training with them on labyrinth work. And the labyrinth is a metaphor for going deeper into your spirit, going deeper into meditation, reflection. It is a circular path that, unlike a maze, has one way in and one way out. So it's meant to quiet the mind, calm the mind, and when you reach the center point, that's symbolic of your center. So you release on the way in the center, you receive, and on the way out, you energize. And so people you can use that for anything from creative projects to calming the spirit, calming the mind, and for healing. There are many hospitals now, and there's public parks as well as churches, of course, who have installed labyrinths.
So you also worked at a cancer wellness center to walk the labyrinth with the patients. Was there anything that came out of that you thought was particularly profound?
I can remember several instances of people sharing after the labyrinth, and the extraordinary thing about it is that everyone gets what they need on their walk. And so for this one woman, she said, I had my treatments 20 years ago, and I've been holding on to anger about some of the events around the treatments for that amount of time, and I finally feel I can let it go.
Wow.
That's huge.
That is.
That's just huge. and for someone else, a deep appreciation of slowing down and appreciating the little things in her life, the butterfly that flew by while she was doing the walk, the air, the temperature, and she actually wrote a poem about it. And this was a woman who had no formal education and had developed something so extraordinary with her words and so powerful that it was very moving for all of us.
Wow, it's wonderful.
I have a Labyrinth story. It's not as profound as what you just said, but I was in Ghost Ranch many years ago, and I didn't know what a labyrinth was. So I read the little placard, and I did what I was told, and I found it fascinating because from having no experience, I realized I'm really impatient. Like I had to force myself to slow down, and then I started judging, I'm not doing this right, and I had all these negative self-thoughts, and I came out of that with this, wow, like as far as realizing how I talk to myself and beating myself up, and just like I need to slow down and do this more often. So just having experienced it that one time with no prior knowledge, I can attest that it is quite a revealing experience.
It is, and a facilitator would say to you, to prep you, is to take everything that happens to you on the labyrinth as a metaphoric experience. And so the idea of slowing down is a big one. Big one, yeah.
So I want to go back to Nia for just a minute, because you've worked with Nia for a number of years and trained countless others in this technique. What made you choose Nia versus some other method? Why do you like it more than, say, yoga or Tai Chi?
Well, Nia is the technique that opened my heart and my spirit. Even though Nia is a fitness practice, and that's how I came to it, that's how many people came to Nia, it's not the way I react to it now or believe in it. My first experience in Nia, it was an hour. I didn't know what I was doing. I was sure I was doing everything wrong, though. I was absolutely positive about that. I had a reaction saying, gosh, I hope that nobody I know sees me doing this. And I looked at the instructor and I was in awe. I thought, what would it be like to be able to move that freely and with that much passion? So I was fascinated that she could do it. And then after the 1 hour class, I went into the gym, I took a shower, and in the shower, I just stayed there and I just wept for 30 minutes.
Oh my God. I
had an extreme emotional release. I knew that I'd found something important, and I didn't quite understand the why of it, but that's why I do Nia.
Wow, that's really interesting. But I know you do other things too, and we want to touch on those. Tell us a little bit about your writing retreats and also the retreats you do for women.
I love doing these writing retreats, and that I have always written from teenage years on. I wrote poetry. Symbolic poetry. I majored in English and in college, and I was a writer for many years of television scripts, training scripts, TV shows, and so writing has been in my wheelhouse, as you put the word. And the writing is another aspect of creative expression. Movement is one. Writing, so movement is for the body. Writing is for the mind and spirit, and also emotions. I love writing workshops that are done that involve beauty and nature and the inspiration of that.
So at Selby Gardens, where you have some of your writing retreats, I know that you do multiple techniques about walking through the gardens, looking at paintings, and helping people find their creativity. Can you explain the process just a little bit?
Sure. I like the idea of combining the inspiration of nature and the gardens with writing. So the retreat begins with writing exercises. We go take a look at whatever the circulating exhibition is at Selby. Very often it's now they are bringing in artists, the works of great art, and they're up for 5 or 6 months. And I develop a program around that. So it becomes the inspiration of nature and the artist that they've selected who's representing nature. First it was Marc Chagall, and then Andy Warhol, and beginning in February of 2019, it will be Gauguin. Wow. And yes, and so the retreats often bolster that, and so I'm developing something called Write Like an Artist. It's
I love that.
Yeah. And so using the techniques of adding color and design the same way that an artist does with something on the canvas.
Wonderful.
So I have to go back to this because you mentioned when you were doing Nia that you're like, I hope nobody's seeing me do this. And you come from like a corporate, very professional background. So for you to go to explore this creativity, you had to come to terms with this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. So for somebody listening who might be very corporate, and I can tell if they're listening to this, they're fascinated with these opportunities. Where would they stick a toe in? Would they take a Nia class? Would they take a writing class? See what resonates with them?
I think that you go for what draws you or what you're led to. And for me, it was as simple as a physician saying you need some sort of weight-bearing exercise. Okay. And my saying, okay. And I guess I don't have any of that. Then I always say Nia came and found me, in that it happened to be in my employee wellness gym. And so I first went to down to the gym, which I hadn't set foot in the 10 years I'd been there, and since I didn't consider myself at all athletic. And so finding, I think in any of these things, keep trying till you find something that really you feel good about and passionate about. It may not happen right away, just as I've said while I was there in the first class, I wanted to go, but immediately after, I started feeling the impact and the effects. And so sometimes, whether that's writing for you or something of movement, like Nia, a lot of people enjoy yoga, find what suits you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in total alignment with your personality, in that it might open up a new part of you that you didn't know had not been opened yet. That's certainly what happened for me.
So, Gail, you didn't mention your retreats for women. Can you describe those a little bit?
She does it all. We need another hour.
Well, the retreats combine all the things we've been talking about. They combine Nia, they combine journaling, they combine archetypes. Sometimes they're all together in a group, and then other times they're focused, so that there may be a retreat just for Nia, or there may be a retreat just for writing. I also do retreats with other people. One of my mentors, who has become a close friend, is Denise Medved, and we do 2 a year. And then I do some on my own here in Florida or other places as well.
Wonderful. And where can people find more information about everything that you do?
Well, I have a website. It's gailcondrick.com. And there you can find my schedule and how to get in touch with me and some more information about everything we've been talking about.
Gail, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Danielle and Cindy. What a treasure.